Iwi Chairs Forum Climate co-chair Mike Smith will attend the United Nations Conference of Parties, or COP27, where world leaders will be discussing the global climate emergency. He's currently in Ireland and about to head to the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, so we asked him how he felt travelling to that part of the world.
It's quite a dangerous place, the Sinai Peninsula. We've got ISIS and Al Qaeda up to the north in the northern Sinai. We're within the range of ballistic missiles from Iran. Saudi Arabia's next door, and they've just decided that they're going to go with Putin against their cosy relationship they've had traditionally with America. You've got sort of general instability in the region, in the Middle East as a whole. And then here we are on the tip of the Sinai Peninsula with all the assembled world leaders. It's a juicy target. So and if anything does go wrong and people go, Mike should have known better, well, please tell everybody that, he did know better and he went anyway.
This is the 27th United Nations Climate Change Conference. What's your experience been like around these huis?
Yeah, well, I attended the first global summit way back in 1992, and since then there have been another 27 of what are now called the COPWI, which stands for the Conference of Parties, and the parties being world governments, as you said, and their leaders. So back in 92, I thought that all we needed to do was get on with the job of reducing greenhouse emissions. So I didn't bother going to any more of these conferences until it became clear that while the process of achieving a global consensus on what needed to happen has been staggering along, the political action required to prevent the crisis has not been happening fast enough now, or indeed is not happening at all.
And
there's two...
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, there's two major reasons for this, both globally and nationally. And one of them is that we're locked into various extractive economies, both here and across the world, that are fundamentally based on selfishness and greed, I would say, fundamentally. And that puts profit before the well-being of our present and future generations. So that's the first thing. And we've inherited that as part of the history of colonisation. We've inherited these extractive industries that seek to strip the wealth out of our countries. And it's like a drug addiction that we feel we can't do without, even though we know it's killing us, these extractive industries. So we need a new economic model. That's the first thing. And the second element is that there's no scientific solution to selfishness and greed. So the polarisation between rich and poor around the globe is making us more vicious. It's making us more uncaring societies, incapable of responding to the need for collective well-being. So we need a morality reset. And so I think these are the two fundamental system change aspects that we need at this time now.
I know you're alongside fellow Iwi Chairs Forum co-chair Lisa Tumahai, who's also representing the Climate Commission. Who else is travelling with you for this conference?
Yeah, so each of these conferences attracts usually a group of rangatahi Māori from Aotearoa who attend. There's also some communication specialists like Kera O'Regan, who provide very valuable services to the Indigenous working parties there, and she leads out in a lot of that work. In addition, we've got technicians from the Iwi Chairs Forum that are coming along as well. So there's a reasonable group of Māori that are attending, plus there's some Māori officials with the MFAT, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade.
And to your point, one of the real challenges for you is profit over people and you figuring out how to make this right. How crucial then is it for this international effort in attacking the climate crisis?
Well, it's fundamental that people across the world create a mandate for change that drives the political effort. Otherwise the vested interest groups push back against the types of changes that are required. And also the politicians are nervous about the impact that these policies are going to have on the voting public. And so if the voters care, well, then the politicians will care. If the voting population says go further, then the politicians will find the courage to stand up against those that would weaken the effort. So it's really important that everybody buys into this. It's a bit like COVID, when we had the team of 5 million here in Aotearoa, and that was instrumental in getting us through in such a good way that we all did. So we've got to once again come together collectively and play that part. But not only just nationally, this is not called New Zealand warming, it's called global warming. So we've got to do this, as a world population. And so, but I think that's increasingly happening. I think we're seeing as the extreme weather events roll out across the lands and across countries, and they really are really extreme. Well, then people are starting to wake up to what's happening, and so increasingly there'll be a political mandate.
So, what are you expecting then from the engagement with other Indigenous peoples for this trip?
Yeah, so I think we've got to support each other as Indigenous communities, because most Indigenous communities don't have power. They're subject to the whims of the political groups that control nation states, and Indigenous peoples get marginalised in that process. And yet, even though they probably contribute the least to global emissions and global warming, we probably suffer the most, in the sense that Indigenous peoples don't have the resources or the decision-making power to do much about it. And so I think it's important that we come together, but I also think that we've got a special part to play in terms of the morality reset, and that Indigenous communities have lived close to nature and as part of nature for a long time. So we've developed tikanga and systems within our own cultures that guide us on how to walk softly on the earth.
Yeah.
And of course, many of these have been eroded by colonisation, but I think that's what we bring to the party, Neil.
Yeah, wonderful. Iwi Chairs Forum Climate Co-Chair Mike Smith, thank you so much for joining us today. Safe travels.
Kia ora. Thank you, Neil. All the best.